Hi, I'm Shirley Cloyes DioGuardi, Balkan Affairs Advisor to the Albanian American Civic League. Years ago, the late Arben Jaferi, then the leading Albanian politician in Macedonia, said that it was Joe DioGuardi's advocacy for Albanian freedom when he was a member of the U.S. Congress in the 1980s that marked the beginning of the diplomatic effort to resolve the Albanian national cause in the late 20th century. I wasn't there when Joe was in Congress, nor was I on the scene when he formed, with a core group of Albanian Americans, the Albanian American Civic League. I was a book publisher specializing in international politics, and I was deeply concerned about the rise of Slobodan Milosevic. It was that concern that led me to Joe and to the Albanian American Civic League. During those years, as I watched Bosnia, as the world failed to act, leading to 250,000 dead and 4 million displaced, I began to realize that stopping Slobodan Milosevic's genocidal march across Europe was deeply connected to resolving the Albanian national cause, and it would require a strong diplomatic effort. As we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Albanian American Civic League, I think we can safely say that it was a civic league working with the foreign policy leaders in the U.S. Congress that prevented Kosova from befalling the fate of Bosnia. We can say that it was this work that prevented the criminalization of the Kosovo Liberation Army, that ultimately led to NATO bombing Serbia, that led to Slobodan Milosevic being taken to the War Crimes Tribunal in The Hague, and ultimately that resulted in the recognition of Kosovo as a sovereign independent state. In preparation for the 25th anniversary of the Albanian American Civic League, we have spent the last year digitizing our archives so that for the first time you will be able to see full coverage of rallies, hearings, speeches before the U.S. Congress and in the press and parliaments of the world in our effort to save Kosovo. In addition, please visit our website at www.aacl.com to access 25 years of reports to politicians in America and around the world, and articles aimed at educating the international community about the Albanian reality, characterized by 125 years of arrest, torture, incarceration, forced expulsion, and genocide at the hands of hostile Slavic regimes. As we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Albanian American Civic League, I think we know that our job is not yet over. Kosovo is an independent state in name only because the Serbian-Albanian conflict has yet to be resolved. Since the end of the war, Belgrade has embarked on an unfortunately successful propaganda campaign to miscast Albanians as a Muslim, potentially terrorist force in the heart of Europe. As we all know, Albanians are Muslim, Orthodox Christians, Roman Catholics, and Jews who have lived side by side in harmony for centuries. Meanwhile, Albanians in Macedonia, Montenegro, the Preševa Valley, and Shamria are second, if not third-class citizens. And so a strong diplomatic effort must go on in the press and the parliaments of the world. But it cannot go on without your support. It is our responsibility to resolve the Albanian national cause in our time. And so, on behalf of the Albanian American Civic League's Board of Directors, I invite you to become a member of the Albanian American Civic League. Please join us on this journey. It's important. Faleminderit.
As bombs fall in Yugoslavia for yet another night, it appears to be getting ugly in Pristina. NATO and the Serbs are blaming each other for the devastation and the strikes on Kosovo's capital, and the city is a disaster area. Now, Tim Marshall, he was at Ground Zero, reporting for us with our sister network, Sky News, but I must tell you that his report had to be approved by Serb censors before it could get out.
From here they fled, and to here they must return. If not, what was it for? NATO's air raids have reduced large parts of the city centre to ruins. The telecommunications and post office building is rubble. So are many civilian buildings, including a shopping street. The city bank caught much of the blast. 9 civilians were allegedly killed in the raid so far, 15 injured. Most of the city centre is in ruins. You can't just see the destruction, you can smell it. The smoke on the horizon is from a burning fuel dump hit overnight. And between here and there, it's a ghost town. This was a town of 280,000 people. We're told that half have gone, either because of the airstrikes or at the point of a gun. We couldn't tell. The rest allegedly are in the shelters. Soldiers and police populate the town day and night now. A handful of civilians are on the streets, a few armed, some with guns, others only with their anger and tears. Perhaps this damage can never be repaired.
You're all idiots! All your people! All your nation! Tell you people, how creatures are you?
Another blow. The city cemetery took a direct hit, possibly aimed at a nearby train track. Dozens of graves damaged, 5 or 6 utterly obliterated. The Kosovan regional governor showed us the remains of his government building. This, he said, was where the NATO politicians used to come for meetings. Never again. Some civilians were clearing up. They'll probably have to do it again. This cafe was next to what was a street of artisans.
This was the pride of Pristina. There you had the shops of Serbs, Albanians, Turks. All of the people, the shop owner here, all of them spoke 3 languages, and none of them was nationalist. And this, as you can clearly see, is a barbarian act, nothing else.
Pristina is the regional headquarters for where the Serbian operation against the KLA was launched. With all its terrible repercussions, those repercussions have come full circle. If the refugees can ever return home, they'll come back to a smashed city. The war is costing a fortune, and rebuilding during the peace will be the same. Tim Marshall, Sky News, Pristina.
Joining us now in New York, retired Army Colonel David Hackworth, also Shirley Cloyes, Balkan Affairs Advisor for the Albanian American Civic League. We just saw that devastation and that peace, and during that, you said, in the middle of it, I'll quote you, what did we do this for? Yeah. That's what you said. Why did you say that?
It just doesn't make sense. Why would NATO bomb a city like that? Now, you can't say all of that damage was caused by NATO. A lot was caused by the Serbs. But to me, it not exactly a military target. It didn't lend itself to the destruction of the Serbian army. What was the point of it?
Shirley, you even want to go further. Not only have you supported the president and supported these strikes, which one of the big results that was not anticipated by the administration was the escalation by Slobodan Milosevic against the ethnic Albanians, but you want to take it a step further. No, you are willing to send in U.S. troops, men and American boys into this conflict, and you want these forces on the ground. Tell us why.
Wait a minute. Let's start with what Colonel Hackworth just said. Do you really believe that NATO's responsible for most of this damage? Isn't this Slobodan Milosevic's M.O. again and again? We've seen this. He's conducted 4 wars, as we know, since 1991 in the Balkans.
Do you disagree with the analysis that the NATO bombing resulted in his escalation against the ethnic Albanians?
Absolutely not. Again and again, we have to go back to the fact that between Rambouillet and Paris, for 3 weeks, we were supposedly in negotiations. And what was happening? 40,000 Serbian troops were amassing on the border with M84 tanks.
They dug themselves in because we told them either you go along with this idea where you would grant autonomy. He didn't want to go along with that deal, and then he had all this time to dig in these 40,000
exactly.
troops.
Shirley Cloyes, you know, we have bombing now taking place in the suburbs of, right around the suburbs of Belgrade,
right.
and yet there's talk about the POWs being released tomorrow. Why should we be bombing the night before we're hoping that Milosevic might release our soldiers. Does that make any sense?
Alan, unfortunately, our bombing has nothing to do with Milosevic. This is a classic Milosevic ploy. No. This is a classic Milosevic ploy to drag out 3 of our servicemen and dangle those men before the world audience. He has no intention
shouldn't we be giving every opportunity and not give him any excuses to give every possibility these men will be released?
This is his MO. Remember when he dragged out, he thrust William Walker out of, he kicked him out, right?
Why
what did he do? He deflected world attention and then massacred 45 people in Racek. This is just a ploy, just as he's calling for a ceasefire.
Why give him an excuse? The night before a potential release, why not make every possibility
it will not work. It will not work. That's what Milosevic wants. There is no relationship.
Colonel, what have we accomplished by bombing at this point the suburbs of Belgrade?
Well, we're bombing a lot of empty buildings, much as we've done in Iraq. So the bombing really has very little effect on the outcome of the war. The thing that I took from the story tonight was the thousands of Serb people who wrapped themselves around the existing bridge across the Sava and said, bomb away, because we're going to have a jazz concert, which tells you my experience, which goes back 53 years with the Serbs. They're really tough people, and when you get them into a fight, you are really into a fight.
And they're dug in, and this is their Shirley, Shirley, I want to go to you. The hardline Serb vice premier said, because there's all these reports these prisoners of war are going to be released here, but he's saying freeing the U.S. Prisoners of war, quote, is out of the question. Soldiers should be tried as terrorists. So we're getting conflicting stories about whether or not they're going to be released tomorrow. And I know...
Well, expect those conflicting stories. But what I want to know is, we're talking all about troops. We're talking about the failure of the air war. Why are we not playing this to win? Why are we not, first of all, arming the KLA?
Mr. Milosevic, as you all have seen, has carried all of us into the heart of darkness. It's a place where the law of rule grinds its heel and boot over the rule of law, and where justice amounts to nothing more than a bullet in the back of the brain.
But the problem is we totally underestimated Slobodan Milosevic. What were we thinking when we said, oh, if we start the bombing, he will back off and we'll be back at the negotiating table?
I want to go back to my original question, which you ducked the first time I asked, and that is now you want to take it a step further. You're willing to send in American boys on the ground to continue this fight.
Sean, you didn't hear me. I want to start with arming the KLA. Why is that off the table? Why aren't we talking about that?
See, now there's an area you and I agree with, and I actually think before we
need to do that. Why can't we get our policymakers to discuss?
But before we got involved in the bombing, Shirley, why didn't we at least debate that or discuss that? Why did we move forward? Now, wait a minute. Now, the next question is, but you're willing to take it a step further, and you want to send troops in.
Yes, but I want answers to why we're not armming the KLA.
Number one, we did it in Bosnia. We did it with the Croatians.
That's how we brought Milosevic to the table. He only understands force.
Colonel Hackworth.
Okay, let me say this. Giving a soldier a rifle does not win a war. And it's absolute wrong if you think if you can give weapons to the Kosovos and you're going to make a difference. It takes about 10 years to build an army. Sure, you can have in Kosovo what you had before, a bunch of rebels killing Serbian policemen. That's what started this.
That's not how it started at all, by the way. And the Army has been training since 1993.
We're well training
Many of the people involved are generals from the former Yugoslav Army when the Confederation was intact under Teton fighting.
I mean, what are we fighting for at this point? I mean, he's declared a ceasefire in honor of Orthodox Easter.
A ceasefire.
And now,
he's pandering to the Orthodox Alliance
but, I mean,
in doing that and to world sympathy. Now, how can we be responding to someone who's overseeing mass extermination and mass expulsion and then raising the flag of religion?
And he's saying the refugees can go back now to their homes. You believe that?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely
So are you saying if they go back to their homes, he'll slaughter them?
First of all, there's nothing there. And secondly, how can you, again, respond to someone who's involved in mass extermination and mass expulsion? Now they can come back?
We've done this huge amount of bombing.
I don't think so, Alan.
We've got everybody, all the ethnic Albanians out of there. What are we trying to win at this point? What is there left to win there?
We don't have all the ethnic Albanians out there. And what we have to win is we have to stop Slobodan Milosevic's genocidal march
He's already done it.
He's now, no, he wants to invade Montenegro.
Let me ask a question. The bottom line is that The recruiting command told me today that nobody is joining the service. They've never had a worse period of time. So then I went to local recruiting commands, and I said, is any Albanian Americans joining? Do you know that the war's been going on 15 days, and people like you want us to get stuck in the war?
No,
but
they're joining the KLA. You're wrong. They fly out every week.
Has joined the U.S. Army.
They've joined the KLA.
Not one Albanian American has joined the U.S. Army.
You're not listening.
Days, but
they risk their lives.
You want my 21-year-old son to go fight for
a year,
Albania.
Albanian Americans, I've met them, young men, have gone every week. They fly over to Albania. Many of them have died, and they are willing to die. The KLA is willing to die, and Albanian men from all over the Balkans and the United States are moving in to Albania.
You know what I'm going to do with my 21-year-old son if he's drafted? I'm driving him to Canada.
Okay, and that's fine.
Yeah.
That's your choice.
Canada.
Yeah.
But the KLA is prepared to fight. Albanian men are prepared to fight. Why won't we discuss this?
One American
why won't we discuss this?
I want you to respond to what he just said. It's not worth one American life. What do you say? How do you... hang on a second, Shirley. Let me get the question.
Okay.
I want you to talk to the mothers and fathers and the children of these brave servicemen, and you explain to them why.
I'll be happy to. The problem that we face and that all Americans have to face is that we have a new Hitler in the heart of Europe who's been on a genocidal march across Europe, and we have to look at the kind of world that we're going to move into. And Mr. Milosevic has not finished after the mass expulsion and extermination of Albanians. He has every intention of moving into Montenegro. We're going to go into a wider war, losing more lives.
Joining us now in New York, former New York Republican Congressman Joseph DioGuardi. He is now the president of the Albanian American Civic League in Washington. We have Republican Iowa Senator Charles Grassley and former Arizona Democratic Senator Dennis DeConcini. Senator DeConcini, welcome back. Good to see you. Senator Grassley, good to see you.
Good to be with you.
You know, the military calls it collateral damage, Senator, which is an antiseptic term for the inevitable victims of war. Do you agree with, I mean, is this something we have to expect being involved in this?
When you say senator, do you mean Senator Grassley or Senator DeConcini?
Well, we start with you, Senator Grassley. You can go first.
Okay.
But, I mean, we're talking about these tragedies, these innocent people, these victims of the NATO bombing. Is this something we have to anticipate and expect, as the president said?
The answer to that is definitely yes. When the president was advised by his generals before he made a decision to do that, to go to bombing, that he shouldn't do it, and he decided not to listen to them. We're seeing some of the end result of not accepting, as a political leader, some of the wise judgment of your military leaders.
You know, I have been making this point, Senator DeConcini. The brightest military minds in the country warned this president airstrikes alone will not be able to accomplish the mission that he wants. We now see the escalation. We have 24 Apaches, 82 planes, the request for 300 more, and then the possibility of some congressmen want to send in ground troops. Senator DeConcini.
Yeah, but Sean, you know, you got to look at the history here. You know, there was a division in our military about bombing Bosnia, or whether to send ground troops or whether to send any bombing or not. And General McPeak, who was the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, said we could do it with air only, and it turned out to be right. A lot of people said we couldn't within the military. I was chairman of the Intelligence Committee then, and I remember so well, even during the Persian War, there was a split. There was a division within the military. Somebody, commander-in-chief, President of the United States, whether it's Bush or it's Clinton, has got to make the decision.
Right,
and I think the president has made the right decision and is using caution, but he's using the force of our military technology.
Senator DeConcini, we know the senators, senior four-star officers, prior to the engagement that's going on in Kosovo, that they warned the president about this. We now find ourselves in a position today where Secretary of Defense William Cohen says this Kosovo conflict can stretch into the summer. He acknowledges American casualties are likely. We now see the escalation. There's a lot of talk about ground troops. We have to ask some serious, significant questions that have not been raised heretofore. Is Why are we there? What is our end game? What is our exit strategy? And is it a vital U.S. interest, the Powell Doctrine question?
Yeah, well, the question why we're there is because Mr. Milosevic is committing genocide. Now, the question is, what is the end strategy? What are we going to do? Well, I don't think we have to disclose that, and I happen to agree with the President. There's no reason to commit ground troops. I don't think we have to pay that dear a price, but we do have a responsibility to respond. What this President has done is put 19 countries together, NATO, to do an air campaign. That's quite a feat in and of itself.
Congressman DiConcini, just before we bring you in, Congressman DioGuardi, Congressman DiConcini, you said we don't have to disclose an exit strategy, but we do have to have one. And I question whether we even have an exit strategy. If we know at the end, at least in the Persian Gulf War, we knew what would have to happen for us to get out of there.
Yeah, that's true, but it's a different kind of war. Senator Grassley and I have been over there. We know what that terrain is like, and we may have a disagreement on whether you should use ground forces or not, but it's so different than the Persian Gulf War, we cannot compare the same kind of terrain and the same kind of war.
We have to know what would have to happen, though, for us to get out. Congressman DioGuardi, you know, here's the situation. I think
why are we listening to the generals now? They're saying that we should commit the ground troops if we want to win this one.
Well, you know, what I don't understand, though, is we're told at the outset, we'll go in, we'll do an incursion, we'll bomb him, he'll back off, that'll be the end of it. Now we're hearing July. We're hearing figures like $8 billion. We're hearing ground troops. Why couldn't we have been told the truth about this from the beginning? I think they tried to get us into this administration, without telling us up front what the parameters were. And that's what's infuriating to the American people, not to be told the truth.
The worst thing that we're hearing is that we have almost 1 million refugees, displaced people in Kosova, and they may be starving. Isn't that a good enough reason now to get on with this thing and finish it?
I think it's a great reason.
Arm the Kosovo Liberation Army. We armed the Croats.
You want to arm the KLA?
Why not? Didn't we arm the
terrorist
Croats?
Group?
Didn't we? It's not. Where are you hearing that from? Mr. Shremick, the Serbs?
It's been all over the place.
Come on.
They're funded, but you deny that they're funded by drug. You deny that they're funded by drug money.
Absolutely. That's Milosevic. You got the wrong.
I'll tell you what. We have some breaking news. The bombing continues tonight. By the way, here are the latest pictures out of Yugoslavia. NATO is pressing its air campaign, hitting military installations, TV transmitters, and bridges tonight. These are the latest pictures throughout Yugoslavia, and targets included some in Montenegro and Belgrade, and 2 explosions and a large fire were reported. An oil refinery and an oil depot were hit, according to Yugoslavia's official news agency. Belgrade sky was lit up by anti-aircraft fire as NATO planes continue to fly over the city as we speak. So those are the very latest pictures. We have the latest developments coming out of Kosovo.
You know what's going on, don't you? The people that help me don't trust you not to write a story that's about something other than Kosovo, and they think the longer I stay up here, the greater my chances of screwing up. That's really what's going on here. And it's wonderful when you're not running for anything. You can say that, you know, just exactly what's on your mind.
Mr. Clinton spoke today at a gathering of newspaper editors. He said he's afraid of us press people. Welcome back to Hannity and Combs. I'm Alan Combs. Remember, we'll be joined by Paula Jones tomorrow night. But right now, we're talking about the conflict in Kosovo with former New York Republican Congressman Joseph DioGuardi, now president of the Albanian American Civic League, Iowa Republican Senator Charles Grassley, and former Arizona Democratic Senator Dennis DiConcini. Senator Grassley, what about this idea, as Congressman DioGuardi said, of arming the KLA? A good idea or bad idea?
We armed the Croats in Bosnia.
Senator Grassley?
It would be a better idea than having American troops on the ground.
But isn't it a little late for that?
But let me say, you know, listen, everything we've been talking about here is just shows what's wrong with this whole policy. We stumbled into Kosovo, and I'm surprised that a president who objected to the war in Vietnam, did not want to be drafted, and ought to learn by that, because we stumbled our way through Vietnam and finally just barely got out. And we've stumbled now into Kosovo again, that we would have history repeat itself.
You know, I'm with you on this one. This may shock you. I'm the liberal on the show, but I agree with you on that. And I'm shocked that we're involved here at the hands of President Clinton. Senator DiConcini, wouldn't it have been better in the first place to arm, if not the KLA, at least provide munitions to others who could have carried out this policy rather than us doing it ourselves, spilling American blood?
You don't know for sure that's not happening, because some things happen that are covert and that are classified. Number two, the president is doing the right thing. He is using the military force without jeopardizing hundreds of thousands of American men and women. I think it's a good policy. I think it's responsible to go in there and do something. We also are providing aid for the humanitarian aid. That's what this is all about. And Milosevic is the villain here. He's the one that's got to be held responsible even for the accidents. This wouldn't have happened had he not moved into Kosovo. He's been threatening those people. I've been there 3 times. I've seen him absolutely run into the ground, discriminated again.
Joining us now is a panel of experts in our New York studio, Joe DioGuardi, a former Republican congressman and president of the American Albanian Civic League, Shirley Cloyes, also of the Albanian American Civic League, and Radmila Milentijevic. She's a former Minister of Information for the Republic of Serbia, and we thank everybody for coming in today. Radmila, let me begin with you. As you see, obviously you have some sympathies for the Serbian side of this conflict, having worked for the Serbian government. But as you see these pictures that a lot of people in Serbia aren't seeing of these desperate refugees, almost all of them saying the same thing about how they were kicked out of their house by Serb goon squads. What do you think? I mean, you can't look at those pictures without being moved, can you?
Of course, I am moved, and I feel very badly for the refugees. But I think having gone out of Kosovo into Albania or Macedonia, they're better off than the people who are staying in Kosovo and the people in Yugoslavia, because bombs have turned Yugoslavia into a vast, not a concentration camp.
But they all say that their exodus began before the bombs came in.
No, there were very few people in either Macedonia or Albania, and there were very few casualties before the bombing started. The bombing escalated violence to the point where we have the mess that we have now.
Well, Joe, you say it's not true. On the other hand, in support of Radmila's position, it's clear that the United States and NATO haven't improved the situation since they began their bombing, have they?
Do you remember last summer, 250 villages were torched? They tried to eliminate the KLA. Holbrooke made some unholy deal to look the other way.
The Kosovo Liberation
Army. And instead of...
some people call terrorists, by the way.
Which is ridiculous.
Why is it ridiculous?
Well,
there
go
are
back
some
to the congressional
massacres that they're responsible for, no?
Go back to the congressional record.
You're shaking your head no.
Go back to the congressional record on March the 12th, 1998, when that question was put to Ambassador Gelbard, and he was clear to say, no, it is not...
But Joe, Shirley, let me throw this to you. We've had Holbrooke on, Richard Holbrooke. Yes. He has qualms about the KLA, or at least he did a year ago. He expressed those qualms. I mean, clearly the KLA isn't one of these great, seamless, heroic group of liberation fighters.
Why do you say that? Where is there any indication of that? If you look at our own country reports, if you look at the State Department country reports year after year, since Slobodan Milosevic invaded Kosova in 1989, David, you will see a litany of horrors. You will not see any corresponding...
No, we're not talking about the Serbian horrors now, but we're talking about the KLA.
I'm talking about substantiation.
Are they a group we want to get behind?
He has questions about the Kosovo Liberation Army. It was a grassroots people's movement that arose in response to 10 years of the most brutal occupation in Europe since the Nazi era.
Documented by our State Department country reports.
We are talking about a sovereign state. Serbian armies have not moved out of Yugoslavia. Kosovo is Serbia. Kosovo is our cradle of our civilization. Talking about occupation is like talking about America occupying Texas.
Kosovo has 92% Albanian.
It did
92% Albanian,
have it even now.
And 5% were Serbs, and they treated the Kosovars like an apartheid, like a concentration camp for 10 years. Every year, the State Department's country reports show a litany of horrors against the Albanian people.
The Constitution changed in '89.
In '89, Milosevic essentially said...
No, it was Yugoslavia. It was not Milosevic, it was Yugoslavia. In '89, we had Yugoslavia. All 6 republics had to approve the change of the Constitution.
By force.
It was not only...
He put tanks on the streets of Kosovo and told the Kosovo parliament, you hand over your power or you get shot.
Let Radmila finish. Go ahead.
Right. But the political leadership of the Kosovo Albanians refused to accept the Constitution, refused to accept Serbia as their state and Yugoslavia as their state.
But Radmila, let me just point out that in 1989, it was the Soviet Union was alive. Slobodan Milosevic was the head of the Communist Party. We're not talking about a democracy here, are we?
No, but in
1989, it was not a democracy. It was a communist power, and Milosevic was a communist leader.
But Milosevic was one of 8 leaders in Yugoslavia. You know,
but it was
a
dictatorship.
Right.
Do you doubt that?
Of course it was a dictatorship.
Of course it was a dictatorship. So how can you say it was a kind of a democratic agreement with the Kosovars?
I'm not saying it was a democratic agreement. What I'm saying is it is wrong to ascribe the change of the Constitution of '89 only to Milosevic. Yugoslavia existed then, and all the presidents of all six republics were responsible for doing what they did.
He dominated the state. That's why Slovenia left, Croatia left, Bosnia left, and Macedonia. He is the last vestige of Stalinist communism in Europe, and when he tried to impose his will on all the rest of Yugoslavia, they ran for the hills, and the Albanians declared their independence.
What would you do if the population in Texas today rose and said, we want to secede from the United States?
No comparison.
And moved and seceded. You would do the same thing as you did in our Civil War. This is a civil war.
This is not a civil war.
Why is it not a civil war, Shirley? Why is it not a civil war?
This is a genocidal war.
Wait a minute. Now Kosovo was a part of the Serbian Republic.
Kosovo had the same status of all 8 units in the Confederal presidency of Yugoslavia.
It was never a republic.
After Milosevic invaded in '89, unfortunately, our State Department, James Baker, decided it would be nice to keep everyone together. The Slovenia managed to fight its war unimpeded and to get out
because there were no
in
Serbs there.
Because
there were no Serbs there.
because they had weapons. After that,
there were also no Serbs there.
Baker stopped all the weapons from going to Croatia and Bosnia, and we have a horror, as you know, called the Bosnian War, leaving 300,000 dead, creating 2 million refugees. Now this man has come back, now how many years later are we, into Kosovo, and we see the specter of Nazi Germany.
Joe, very quickly, very quickly, the question of Milosevic, can we deal with him as a head of state in the future?
Absolutely not.
But he's being dealt with as a head of state, not as a war criminal.
And Clinton is making the same error that Holbrooke made. Holbrooke made him our partner in peace at Dayton. He listened to Holbrooke. He listened to Milosevic when Milosevic says, don't bring the Albanians to the peace table at Dayton, and that's why we have the problem now. The man's a war criminal. He cannot be dealt with.
Okay, folks, hang in there. As our Kosovo special continues, we're going to take your calls on whether you think we should be in this war. Tom from New York, you there?
I'm here.
Hi, Tom. What's your comment about the conflict in Kosovo?
Okay, I think that the real question for most Americans is, what is in our national interest? And the question is whether or not we should allow the concept and acceptance of ethnic cleansing to be a part of our diplomatic future. And I think if we do, then we run the risk and danger of many more conflicts like this.
Okay, Tom, thank you very much for that point. What about that, Joe? The fact is, are we letting ourselves open to all kinds of tribunals, and maybe even if we go in to get Milosevic, maybe people will start going in to try to get some of our leaders?
Well, I think the question that's raised here is that we don't want the vision of Europe going into the 21st century to be ethnically cleansed mini-states. That's the vision of Slobodan Milosevic. We want to go back to what Sarajevo was. Remember the Olympics? That was a multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious state.
But
what happened in the Bosnian
Are you trying
War?
to put the genie back into the bottle, Joe?
Well,
I mean,
listen,
that's the way it was. That's great. Part of that was due to Tito. Part of that was due to a dictator.
That's right, and we need good leadership. And the Serbian people...
We need another dictator in Yugoslavia?
No, they need better leadership there. There's no question about that. And we should have stood side by side, the good Serbian people, when they had hundreds of thousands in the streets of Belgrade trying to get rid of Milosevic.
Okay, Shirley, I know you want to jump in. Red Miller, I just want to take another caller. Don from New York. You there, Don?
I'm here. Good evening.
Hi. What's your comment on Kosovo, Don?
Well, dictator or not, Slobodan Milosevic is the leader of the sovereign nation of Yugoslavia, who has the right to fight to maintain the integrity of the Serbian nation. The Albanians weren't strong enough to hold by military force. That's why they want us to step in as a mercenary force to give them a independent nation on the backs of American lives. What's in it for us?
Okay, Don, let's just leave it at that. What's in it for us, Joe?
Listen,
what is in it
all,
for the United States?
He has lost the moral right to lead a sovereign nation by using the state apparatus to sponsor terrorism against the civilians in that state. That's what he's done. Look what's going on right now. Do you think it's NATO bombs driving out the refugees? This is what's going on right now. Milosevic has calculated this for at least several years. This is his biggest prize. Kosova is where he started his rise to power in 1987, and this he reserved to the end.
Brad Miller, you're shaking your head no, but isn't this what he had planned back in 1989?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But what Milosevic has to do is what every government today in Serbia and Yugoslavia would have to do: defend the integrity of Serbia's border, defend Yugoslavia as an independent and a sovereign state. Yeah. And that's what he's doing.
But Yugoslavia's isn't it inevitable, Red Miller, that the breakup, like we had the breakup of the Soviet Union, what we're seeing in Yugoslavia is the same thing. It's breaking up. All the ethnicities are creating their own states.
And this is what Milosevic wants.
Not all the ethnicities.
Let me give you an example, David.
Isn't that what happened in Slovenia and Croatia?
You have forced the Serbs in Bosnia to live together with Muslims under Muslim leadership. Why did you not allow the Serbs the same right to secede from Bosnia or to secede from Croatia as you have allowed the Croats to secede from Yugoslavia? Or now...
Joe says it's simple.
Let me give a simple example. If your next door neighbor was beating up his wife and kids brutally, and then you went to knock on the door and said, you know, I'd like to, what are you doing here? And he said, this is my home, stay out. Is that permissible? No. The man has committed a crime. You would call the police, they would go in, it would be child abuse, wife abuse. The same thing with international law. You can't have a leader victimize the citizens of a state with state-sponsored terrorism, and then you're going to tell me this is a sovereign state, look the other way. No, and Clinton's made the right decision.
In fact, under international law, and this will become the defining issue, I believe, for the 21st century, you have lost
20 seconds
the right
to wrap it up. Go
to
ahead.
have territorial integrity when you wage war against your own population to the point of genocide.
And Red Miller, you got 10 seconds.
Before the bombing, there were 2,000 casualties in Kosovo. Since the bombing, I cannot count any longer.
You couldn't count them in the 250 villages. There were no monitors.
Bombs are killing all of Yugoslavia.
Red Miller, Joe, Shirley, we have to leave it at that.
Asking Congress for $6 billion of emergency funds to pay for the relentless military pounding of Serb targets in Kosovo and to help ease the refugee crisis. But force has yet to topple Slobodan Milosevic, so now the United States wants to try a different tack. We're asking NATO to form a naval blockade to choke Yugoslavia off from its oil supply. Should the American people foot the bill for the conflict in Kosovo? And since ground troops are out, is a naval blockade the next step? We're joined by former New York Congressman Joseph DioGuardi, Utah Republican Congressman Chris Cannon. Welcome all of you to Hannity and Combs. What about this request for $6 billion? Is that a fair request, and will Congress approve it?
Well, you know, it's sort of an odd thing. When it came out at $2 billion in the first round of suggestion of what this was going to cost, and I thought $2 billion was a little bit low. In fact, I was a little embarrassed that we'd be talking about that kind of money, and it quickly popped to $4 billion, $3 and then $4 billion. Now we're at $6 billion, and you know, you don't know where. You know, if you start at 2 and go to 6, what's the next? Is it going to be 12 and 24? At some point, you know, we have to have some justification for how much this is going to be.
We know that, you know, I was in Congress 4 years, Congressman, and I came there with the background of a certified public accountant, and I found out quickly that government accounting is not an exact science.
But to go from 2 to 6? I mean, how do you account for that?
How about 16? Someone told me.
But I mean, we're talking about billions of dollars here. How can the American people understand this? 1 minute you're asking for $2 billion, then you're asking for 3 times as much money.
It's like any other appropriations bill. We don't have a capital budget. Would you believe it? Everything is lumped in one big pot. There's no capital budget, so some congressman will say, well, it's $2 billion, but we need that for the salary. Someone else say, well, we got to lump in the cost of the equipment, and it goes up. Unless you get a definition of what they're talking about, no one knows.
Well, Congressman Canada, where's the accountability here? Is Congress going to automatically approve this?
Well, I think there'll be a serious debate. You know, one of the problems is that when I heard the $2 billion number, I thought, what are we going to do? Continue to raid the rest of the Defense Department budget? At $6 billion, are we really going to spend that money on this war? Or are we going to continue to raid even more than that from the Defense Department?
And is that going to be enough? Because we're going to have to go in and rebuild after the war. Who knows how long the war will last? Right. It sounds like the sky's the limit here.
Well, it sounds like it's a situation with no definition, with no real clear goals that anybody can understand, certainly not our military. Clearly the military and the political types are talking by each other. One wants to diminish the military capacity of Milosevic. The other wants to drive him from power, and they don't meet. And so what does budget mean when you're talking in terms that you can't even connect?
You know who you've got there in the Kosovo Liberation Army? You have some of the most seasoned generals from the old Yugoslav army. Don't forget, Kosovo was one part of that 8-part Yugoslav Federation, and there were many Albanian generals. They're there directing this group. Don't listen to Slobodan Milosevic. And by the way, they're asking for, in the Lieberman-McConnell trafficking bills, they're asking for $25 million. That's a drop in the bucket
compared to
$6 billion. Give them the guns. They're not looking for Stinger missiles. They just need enough to get those tanks that they're hiding in the woods.
Congressman Cannon, will the Congress ever go along with sending arms and money to the KLA?
You know, when the TAW goes from $2 billion to $6 billion, I would certainly hope so. You know, Frank Wolf just recently visited some of the refugee camps and came back and wrote a report in which he said that virtually every Serbian has a Kalashnikov automatic rifle. It seems to me that you're not going to be able to send Kosovars back, the Albanian Kosovars back into Kosovo without some kind of protection like that, or the same thing will happen in the near future.
What's the end game here, and when is this going to end?
Well, the end game should be to end this as soon as possible. To do that, we should be taking the advice from the seasoned generals. Apply the resources
the
to this
generals
conflict.
want ground troops,
Arm the
right?
KLA, get the ground troops in there, shut this thing down. We're going to have more accidents. It's going to cost a fortune. What are we doing stretching this thing out?
But we can't bomb these people into the Stone Age, can we? There'll be nothing to go back to, nothing to repatriate them to.
You need both. The generals have said you can't have an air campaign without some presence on the ground with the troops. And we know that because the Serbs are digging in. They're digging in. They're camouflaging their tapes, their tanks, and they're camouflaging their missiles. We need to get the KLA in there to take them out.
Congressman Cannon, ground troops. Congress says yes or no.
Our generals are not arguing for ground troops. They're saying we can't accomplish the political objective without ground troops, and they don't want to put ground troops in because it's a war we can't win. The Albanians, on the other hand, the Albanian Kosovars can win that war if we arm them.
Can we possibly win the war without NATO troops on the ground, Congressman Cannon? Can the Kosovars possibly take on the Serbs in their present military state of preparedness?
I suspect that that the Kosovars could do it with many fewer casualties than NATO can do it with ground troops. And frankly, I don't know how NATO does it. We don't know the land. We don't know the places to hide to go. The KLA does know that, and all they need are guns. This is, you know, nothing has changed essentially between now and World War II, when a lot of Serbs were killed.
Wait. We have satellites, we have maps, we have computers, we have much more sophisticated means of waging a ground war today.
But it has to go down a road from one point to another point, and that road is covered by trees on either side and between ridges of mountains. You can shoot a tank with a light anti-tank weapon as easily as you could shoot one in the old days with a bazooka.
And we did this in Bosnia. We did arm the Croatians in Bosnia.
Congressman DioGuardi, is Bill Clinton the person to lead this war?
Listen, right now, he's done the right thing. You know, he's got 2 years to go in his presidency. Everybody is taking a shot at him. He's still standing. And now he's made the right decision to go forward and end this and engage Mr. Milosevic with the only language he understands, and that's force.
The right decision. We've seen nothing more than we've seen hundreds of thousands of refugees. Now they're estimating 100,000 deaths. We've seen that the ethnic cleansing of Kosovo that's already begun as a result of NATO's incursion. Things have gotten how many times worse since NATO went in?
Did you see what was happening while we were talking at Rambouillet? They were marching 40,000 troops into Kosovo with M84 tanks.
Congressman DioGuardi, what's happened since March 24th? How much worse have things gotten since March 24th?
You're going to blame that on the president? How about the Serbs running around and killing, executing,
Congressman Cannon, have we not exacerbated an already terrible situation?
Look, it is impossible to know what might have happened, but what did not happen is we didn't have troops on the ground at the borders to take care of the problem as these people left. Frankly, just a small number of troops on the border of Kosovo would have sent a very strong message to Milosevic, would have maybe slowed down this process.
Worse than that, we told Milosevic they wouldn't be there. Don't you think that the infrastructure is now at the point where this man has been weakened, and now the KLA can go in and take on this army of 40,000 Serbs in Kosovo? Let's do the job. Arm the Kosovo Liberation Army.
Why not fund that $8 billion?
Because we are in it. You know, whether you like the president or not, whether you appreciate the way he approached the issue, whether you like the way he decided or not, there is the concern about having a strong America that actually stands up to people like Milosevic, who, by the way, one of the problems we didn't talk about earlier when we were talking about the acceleration of the ethnic cleansing in Kosovo is the fact that Milosevic has now destroyed his opposition within the country.
Right.
I mean, he has no local opposition. He's been murdering these people in daylight.
It seems to me we made a big mistake going in. Why can't congressmen like you stand up and say, look, we made a mistake, let's get out, and let's help in other ways, humanitarian assistance, medical assistance. Why can't we acknowledge that this was a wrong-headed move and we made a mistake and we're fighting this the wrong way?
I've said that, of course, myself, but on the other hand, Congress has 435 individuals with very different views and reasons for what they do. And in this particular case, you have a combination of the president's supporters and those Republicans who believe that America needs to win if it gets in something. And in the middle of that, it's really hard to say. And the reason I'm so divided personally, it's hard to say no bombs for our people that have already gone over there, that are there now.
Congressman DioGuardi, you say it's not a mistake, but I mean everything. Look what's happened.
Do you see what's going on? Did you see the people on the trains, just like Nazi Germany? This is genocide. Don't be bashful about using the word. You know, we list 9 generals, and we forgot to put Milosevic at the top of the list.
Didn't even include him.
We have to include him. He's the one that's running the show. Could you imagine a country that has a minister of information? Why do you need a minister of information? It's to sort out what you want the people to have, what you don't want them to have.
Do you think we can win this war without ground troops, and do you think the American people will stomach ground troops?
They have to, because we're in it. This is a NATO, excuse me, we've had now a commitment to NATO. We're part of NATO. We know that less than 15% of the troops will be American. I don't want to see one person die, but hundreds of thousands of people are in harm's way now. They're displaced within Kosova.
Bill Clinton,
we don't want to go into the 21st century with this on our record, that we didn't stand up to another Hitler.
Agreed. But we have Rwanda on our record, for crying out loud.
And that was wrong.
Of these problems.
We should have done something.
Solve all these problems with American troops.
All right, Congressman.
We are not going to send troops into
Congressman,
no, we're not.
Congressman
but this is just above Macedonia, and we know that Greece and Turkey are right there, and this could spill over. Bosnia did not have the potential of becoming a European war.
Congressman
Kosova does.
Let me press your philosophical button for a minute. What more noble, what more compelling, what more moral reason can there be for war than to stop a government from slaughtering its own innocent people?
You know, that is a great rationale for people within a country to resist. It is not a rationale for one country to interfere in the internal activities of another country.
Let's go to
the international law.
Excuse me, I disagree with that. Listen, if you had a next-door neighbor that was brutalizing his children and his wife, and you went next door and you knocked on the door and he said, hey, this is my house, stay out, what would you do? You'd call the police. It's a crime.
Right.
Same thing on international law. It's a crime for a state.
There are no international police. We do not have international police, and we are not God. We don't, as Americans, have the ability to know what's right and wrong in every country in the world. And just because it comes to our attention,
we're getting there.
As apparently
we're getting there.
And welcome back to Fox coverage of the conflict in Kosovo. We've been at this thing for a while now, and things just seem to be getting worse and worse for NATO. So we bombed the Chinese embassy in Belgrade on Friday. What, if anything, does that mean for Operation Allied Force going forward? I want to see what my next 2 guests have to say about the whole thing. Joe DioGuardi is the former New York congressman and now the president of the Albanian American Civic League, and Ben Works, who is with the Strategic Issues Research Institute of the U.S. Thanks, guys. Joe, how do we bomb an embassy and not know it?
Hard to believe, isn't it? Terrible mistake. I think what this says is that the longer we draw out this war, and that's what's happening right now, because we don't seem to have the will to win the war against Slobodan Milosevic. What we need from him is nothing less than an unconditional surrender. Otherwise, we will have lost. This war has boiled down now to, is Clinton going to win or is Milosevic going to win? If we give in 1 inch, as we have for 10 years with this man, we're going to lose. And why is this happening? Because we're not arming the Kosovo Liberation Army to do some dirty work for us. We're not sending in the ground troops, and you're going to have many more accidents like this because war's a dirty game.
Well, the more we hear about the KLA, and I had a lot of callers talk about this on a weekend show we did, the more we hear that they may be involved in some bad stuff, and maybe we don't want to be supporting it.
Propaganda. Total propaganda.
There's propaganda coming from all sides, and you sure hear a lot that they may be involved in some drug running. And
prove it. No one yet has proven it. Milosevic from the beginning has referred to the KLA as terrorist KLA, repeats it constantly. That's his new mantra.
We used to call him that, too.
And I'm sorry, I've collected over 35 articles from Western sources going back to the Wall Street Journal that do document a very clear connection between the KLA, heroin, and the mafia. And I happen to know that it's within 10 or so blocks of my own house.
Well, I'll disagree with that, because what they're documenting is the activities of the mafia in Vlora, Albania, the Greek mafia, the Italian mafia, and the so-called Serbian mafia there are all making tons of money on drugs, on weapons, and for some reason, without investigating this, they're now laying this on the Kosovo Liberation Army. It's unfair and it's wrong.
Well, we can talk about this all day, but I guess the more important question today is this bombing of this building that turned out to be an embassy bin. How big a problem is that going to be? I mean, the Chinese may have settled down a little bit, but they were mad as hell over the weekend.
Yeah, I think they want a much more complete investigation than they're getting, and I think they certainly want somebody to pay a price. I think somebody has to step down as a consequence. Who that's going to be and how long this stretches out is a question, but it's very clear that with a $28 billion intelligence budget, this kind of mistake is just
Everybody says mistake, and certainly we're hearing from all quarters that it's a mistake, but would there be any sort of reason for someone to suggest to our military, yeah, this is not the embassy, this is the target you're looking for, when in fact they knew better, to try and make already difficult tensions between us and China even worse? Is that possible?
I will say this, that at this late stage of the campaign, where you're going after the targets that support the Army in the field, those are the sorts of things you should be going after, not high-profile targets in downtown Belgrade. But General Clark wanted to continue this psychological bombing that's going on in Novi Sad and Niš, as well as government buildings in Belgrade, most of which were emptied weeks ago.
This news alert suggesting just now that the offer to withdraw, or the order to withdraw some of the troops, is not enough. Slobodan Milosevic trying to play another bit of a chess game here with us?
Absolutely. We've seen this now for 10 years. When are we going to learn? This man has one objective, and that's to stay in power. He's a Stalinist communist. He's the last vestige of that in Europe today, and that's why he walked into Kosovo in '89 to dominate it when the Kosovars wanted democracy, and they tried very hard to get it. And then he went to Slovenia, Croatia, and Bosnia. He wants to dominate everything, and we shouldn't take one promise he makes at its face value. We must be able to see all his troops out. There's still a line in the sand. You know, I asked this question at a hearing in Congress on March 12th. What is our foreign policy, since Bush said there's a line in the sand if you put one Serbian troop there, and then Clinton affirmed that when he came in? I'm told that's still our foreign policy. So why don't we hold out and say every troop has to leave? Why is that important? Well, the Albanian refugees won't come back.
It sounds like we are doing that, at least for now. Should we pull some of our troops out? What to do now in Kosovo? You were talking about some of the atrocities going on over there. We've been at this, what, 46 days now? Haven't stopped a one of them. I mean, is this campaign even working?
It's still going on. We just met in British Columbia. I was away for the week visiting with Albanian families around the country, Chicago, Milwaukee, and then we went to Vancouver. And 14 members of a family flew in with us on the plane from Toronto, and I had a chance to chat with them. But when they got there and talked about what went on, it's hard to believe that people can be so inhuman as to march out 23 members of a family and execute them on the spot. And that's what happened in the village that they came from. And they're telling us they're burning the bodies. Now, when are we going to get in there to find out what's going on? There are 800,000 people, real people, still in Kosovo. They're Albanian. And we don't know whether they're getting food. We don't know whether they're alive. Are we waiting to see what happened in Nazi Germany, where we walk into the concentration camps and find bodies on top of bodies? Yeah. At some point, we got to commit the troops. We got to win this.
Ben, how are we going to get in there?
Well, I don't think militarily there's going to be an invasion. There is not enough international law behind it, not enough international support behind it. And although what Mr. DioGuardi is saying is true to some extent, we don't really know just what the level of atrocities has been, and there have been atrocities on both sides. But it's clear from Stephen Erlanger that enough of this has happened, that there are a number of people who have been thrown in jail, and there are going to be more trials.
Well, we know it's happening. We know that one of our goals is to stop it, and we must know that at least on the surface here on day 46, we haven't stopped a thing.
We have not stopped a thing. We've accelerated it. The whole refugee effusion from Kosovo happened after the bombs started dropping, as did virtually all of the atrocities that are being alleged.
Do we need to take
nothing has worked, and at the same time, by bombing the Chinese embassy, the United States and NATO have put itself in a vastly weaker condition against the Russians, the Chinese, and the Japanese, and those who think NATO's already crossed a line in international law.
A little more tension on the alliance. It has not cracked. No one is suggesting that it has. But if things like this start happening and we keep the current posture over there, couldn't this alliance be in a little bit of trouble?
Well, that's a point, and I think we have to ask ourselves, is there another deal in the wind here? I mean, why would NATO implement policies that go against what they're saying their objectives are? Why did Mr. Holbrooke now, who lied about giving a speech in Athens, he left those very sensitive negotiations last year in Europe, and now, after lying about the fact that he went someplace, someone produces the ticket that he was in Athens, so-called giving a speech. Now, you know, is there a plan here? Because I've heard for years the Greeks and the Serbs saying we must keep a Muslim state down in the middle of Europe. Is there really a plan that we're complicit in, that we don't want to see a majority moderate Muslim state from Bosnia through Kosova to Albania? And are we fighting a holy war here against Turkey? Is someone trying to prevent Turkey from coming in the back door now that they've eliminated them from the front door? What's wrong with Turkey, a moderate Muslim country?
I really don't know about this. This is a theory. I think really much simpler. The KLA started this rebellion looking for a civil war, looking to gain independence with the intervention of NATO. But NATO only has a defensive charter, and under the UN charter, there's not much further they can go, especially in terms of invasion of a country that was not attacking.
Well, we could use these. We could use these Apache helicopters that we sent over there. What's up with that?
Don't go there. Those things. It turns out they're not even the D models. They're the A models. They're behind on their maintenance. We've lost 2 in training.
Then why do we send them over there? What are we doing? Are we just trying to blow smoke and mirrors? Didn't we learn at the beginning of this thing that threatening something doesn't work? I mean, what if Slobo giggled? Slobo giggled and we backed up.
I have to disagree with Ben here. The KLA didn't start this. This was started by Slobodan Milosevic in '89.
Well, you know what?
After
Whoever started
the massacres, they had to defend their family.
Joe, you put House Resolution 150 in the Congressional Register in 1986. You've been out for this for long before Slobodan Milosevic
been
arrived.
out to protect the Albanian people.
But the Albanian people were still the government in 1986 and 1987.
But they were once Tito died in 1980, there was state terrorism inflicted on the Albanian people like you can't believe.
The Albanian people were still the majority government of Kosovo.
Yes, but
and it was the Albanians in the 1970s and 80s who were ethnically cleansing the Serbs. And we have that from the New York Times and the Washington Post.
You know what I think is absolutely clear? They're bad guys on both sides of this conflict.
But don't create parity,
now, wait just a minute.
Because
I did not say that.
Nothing compared.
No. There are bad guys on both sides of this conflict. And we, trying to be good guys apparently, are stuck in what appears to a lot of the people who email me to be a no-win situation.
But this is state terrorism against a civilian population.
How do we make this into a possible win?
You get rid of Milosevic. You get rid of Milosevic.
We can't do that.
You have to. He started all of it.
The law.
You have to have an unconditional surrender. He has to be off the playing field as far as politics is concerned in Europe. He has to. Otherwise, you'll see this.
We do not have the army, and we do not have the diplomatic power, and we do not have the political power to make that happen. Unconditional surrender is fine for World War II, fine for the Civil War, but in this situation, we just do not have the
Then I agree with President Clinton. We're going to keep bombing until he understands he's lost.
But
that's the only way.
That's not that.
I think Russia and China are going to change your mind.
Is that working?
Not yours.
And will Russia and China remain on board?
They have
what if? No, they have to.
Russia needs our money, and China needs our trade. And I'll bet you that's what they're concerned about more than anything else.
But you don't think that right now, with the problems that are going on in China, with the upheaval that's going on in Russia, that they'll find political support within their own countries, possibly down the road, if embassies keep blowing up, to figure out a way to put a break in all of this?
We have to be smarter than to make blunders like this blunder, especially with China, who's been so anti-NATO. Why do you think the people on the streets, for weeks now, they've been talking against NATO? They've been revving up the population. All we needed was this blunder. It's a shame that it happened. We have to be smarter. But don't take your eye off the ball. The ball is Mr. Milosevic. Keep bombing, commit the troops. Let's beat him once and for all. He's created a monstrous situation for the last 10 years and should have nothing to do with Europe as it goes into the 21st century.
Guys, thanks a lot for being here. A lot more to discuss here, and we will be back with you to do that.
This is day 53 of Operation Allied Force, and so far there's no clear way out of this conflict. And joining us now with some thoughts on all of this and the NATO air campaign, both from the American Albanian Civic League, we have former U.S. Representative Joseph DioGuardi, along with Balkan advisor Shirley Cloyes. Nice to have you both. Thank you very much for joining us.
Nice to be here, Uma.
Let's talk for a moment about what's at play right now. We are into day 53. Many people say there is really no clear exit strategy at play here, and yet we continue to see thousands of refugees fleeing to the borders, many more coming over to other countries. How do we best resolve this at this point, simply with the air campaign at play, with no guarantee that ground troops are going to be introduced?
Well, again, it depends on what our objectives are. If our objectives are to help save the Albanian people, and we know there are at least 700,000 inside Kosova that may be starving as we speak, then we have to commit the ground troops to get them in there to find out what's going on. The accident that we saw happen happened because it's a deliberate attempt by Slobodan Milosevic now, whose back is against the wall, to put his dug-in tanks and missiles in and around civilian populations, so that when we go after those tanks that are dug in, we're bound to kill civilians. Unless we get the planes lower, and I don't know what altitude that bomb was dropped, but unless we get those warthogs in there the way they're supposed to be, within maybe a couple of thousand feet, not 15, and until we get the troops in, and until we end this, you're going to see many more accidents like this.
Well, right now there's no commitment at this point or public appetite for ground troops at this juncture, and in fact the efforts are heating up to find a diplomatic way out. Do you believe that that's realistic at this point?
I'm not sure that there's no public support. I think the problem has been political confusion in the Clinton administration and in our Congress about what our objectives are here in terms of, are we going to get rid of Mr. Milosevic at this point, who is a genocidal war criminal who's been marching across southern Europe since 1991, or are we wanting to meet him at a negotiating table at the end?
But public opinion polls show that right now, Americans, at least at this point, are not in favor of a ground war if there are efforts underway to find a diplomatic way out of this.
But this is my whole point. If Milosevic is at the negotiating table at the end of this process, which some of our members of our House and Senate envision, we are going to be in enormous trouble. This war will go on for years. So if that's not our intent, if we really want to resolve this conflict, then we're going to have to take other measures immediately. And to avoid the problem of ground troops right now, one of the things we could do is arm the Kosovo Liberation Army, which is actively working with NATO now, is cooperating. And they could do a lot of what has to happen on the ground, including saving the lives of the 700,000 Kosovars that Joe has mentioned that are trapped inside.
But a lot of those people are looking for support from the United States Congress to support funding efforts to arm those guys.
Absolutely. And you can't fixate on the polls, Uma, because those polls change every day, and we know what's happened in the last few weeks. You had the accident with the Chinese embassy. You had other accidents with civilian populations, and when those are put on the TV screens and you don't see the pictures of Slobodan Milosevic's army going into the households, raping, torturing, ethnically cleansing. We're in Washington this week. Here's the report from our State Department. A litany of horrors against the Albanian people, but you don't see this on the screens because we don't have access there. The only solution for the Albanian people, and we're going to distribute tens of thousands of these little bumper stickers, is independence, because independence will bring long-term peace and stability to the Balkans.
But right now you have no commitment from this president or from any other political leader at this point to support an independent Kosovo.
Well, because they see that politically, right now, they've got to get some other things out of the way. But don't forget how Rambouillet ended. To get the KLA to sign the papers, they had to agree to a 3-year period and then a referendum. That referendum is a signal that the Albanians will be allowed to vote their independence and self-determination.
Certainly there are questions right now, Shirley, about the fact that even if there is a peace deal worked out and the Kosovars are returned to Kosovo, will they really want to go back to a province that's going to be controlled by the Serbs still?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely
As they always say, how can you possibly have autonomy under conditions of genocide? How can the Kosovar Albanians possibly go back to a, quote, province that is controlled militarily and economically by Serbia? It's utterly impossible. And meanwhile, Slobodan Milosevic is also destroying his own population in the process. The mayor of Niš, interestingly, a Serb, today said, You can't allow an idea to destroy an entire population. What he misses, and what I believe our government misses, is that Slobodan Milosevic is willing to take out his entire population.
But what about those who say he's already won? He's already won this campaign because he's driven most of the refugees out of Kosovo, and so therefore it doesn't matter if he comes to the table or not because he's achieved his aim.
No, he hasn't. That's what he wants you to believe and us to believe, that he's won. He has not won. He's in a bunker right now, as Hitler was at the end of the war. This could end immediately if we showed the resolve that we should have shown, by the way, years ago. We made so many foreign policy blunders under Baker and Bush, and now under President Clinton and Madeleine Albright and Holbrooke. We have to arm the Kosovo Liberation Army. We did it to the Croatians in the Bosnian War 2 years too late after we lost 250,000, and we have to commit the ground troops. We can win this, and we have to win it. We cannot allow Mr. Milosevic to win 1% of this for what he's done.
We appreciate your insights, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Hannity and Combs. I'm Sean Hannity. NATO has all but abandoned the idea of mounting a ground invasion to expel Serb troops from Kosovo. The alliance is convinced air power alone will force Slobodan Milosevic to leave the ethnic Albanians or let them return to their homes and stay there in peace. And NATO could be right. After months of heavy pounding, the Serb leader is reportedly ready to make a deal, but only if he's allowed to save face. Joining us in New York, former New York Congressman Joe DioGuardi. He's the president of the Albanian American Civic League, and in Washington, California, Republican congressman and a member of the International Relations Committee, Daniel Rohrabacher. Thank you both for being with us. Good to see you.
Good to see
welcome
you.
back, Congressman DioGuardi. Let's talk quickly. After 50-plus days of bombing, here it is, a deal. Milosevic wants it as long as he could save face.
We can't make any deal with Slobodan Milosevic. It's impossible. Anything we do with him will be a failure for the United States and NATO's credibility for years to come. The man's a war criminal. He's been declared as such by almost everybody, the U.S. Congress, the European Parliament. Why are we interested in doing something with him? Aren't we interested in long-term peace and stability in the Balkans?
I got to tell you, Joe, you're making a very compelling case. I'm going to turn to Congressman Rohrabacher. Congressman, I add one thing to what Congressman DioGuardi said, and that is he also has his military. He also has his troops. He also has his power. And then we find ourselves in a situation where it's, you know, Iraq and Saddam Hussein all over again.
It's a Hollywood set.
Yeah.
Well, certainly Saddam Hussein and Mr. Milosevic have a lot in common. And I would agree with Joe that Milosevic is a war criminal. The major question is, what should we as Americans do? And where I probably disagree with Joe is that we should not be expending billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars down there. We should have helped the Kosovars, and Joe and I agree with that totally. From the very beginning, the Kosovars could have done this on their own, but instead we got suckered in by NATO again to paying their defense.
Well, our lack of resolve in Bosnia, and Dana knows a lot about Bosnia. He's been involved in this from a long time before. It's incredible that we waited 2 years too late in Bosnia and lost 250,000 people, displaced 2 million, and we're repeating the same thing in Kosovo. What are we going to learn?
Well, let me ask you one other thing, Joe, because Milosevic is also counting on one of the big mistakes from the very beginning in this entire conflict has been NATO and the president's telegraphing of their every move, and also putting restrictions on themselves. We will not be involved in a ground war. So that really, if we're talking about negotiation or some type of end game to this whole thing, Milosevic finds himself in a position of power, militarily speaking, because the president has gone on record saying no ground troops.
We have made so many blunders, it's hard to believe. And these blunders started with President Bush and his Secretary of State, Mr. Baker, when he gave Milosevic the signal when he said Yugoslavia has to stay together. Then in 1992, when he certified Yugoslavia was in compliance with human rights when they weren't, to give him the aid. Yeah. And then we got Holbrooke saying that we got to keep the Albanians off the table in Dayton. And the Holbrooke again looks the other way when they torched 500 villages last summer and they had that secret meeting at the Leeds Castle. I mean, one blunder after the others. But we cannot have a deal that leaves Milosevic in place, because you won't see Albanians come back. Wait, there's one thing here. We need to have the Albanians return. If Clinton sticks, he's got 5 points. The first 2 points are the most powerful.
if he sticks with those, that all Serb troops have to be removed and all refugees have to be returned, Milosevic will not buy it, and we're going to bomb him in the bunker just like we did.
Congressman Rohrbacher, you know, we have to deal with the reality of the situation. I think we've already lost. The fact is the refugees are gone. Whether or not they will ever get back, we don't know. It's going to cost us how much money? Congress has already asked for twice as much as we thought you'd originally be asking for. And we're going to have to spend how many years and how much of a cost to get things back the way we in the United States think we want them to be.
I think in the end, the price tag is probably going to be at least $50 billion. And that is a staggering amount when you consider that we're trying to put Medicare back in order and all these other things.
What's going to happen to your Republican tax cuts? What's going to happen to the tax cuts, and what's going to happen to the balanced budget?
Yeah, the balanced budget tax cut will be gone. But most importantly, we should learn a lesson from this, and that is we cannot do the bidding of the Europeans. They should, if this was so important to the security of Europe, they should have done it themselves.
Absolutely, but they didn't do it,
Congressman DioGuardi.
We waited for Lord Owen. We waited for Lord Carrington. You know that. They were there in the early 90s. They didn't do anything.
Congressman
They forced us into this.
You keep saying we got to get rid of Milosevic. That's not our role. We have to accept the fact that Milosevic is a leader of Serbia,
no, we don't.
whether you like it or not. It's not for the United States to say who's going to rule that country.
You're a bleeding heart liberal, and you've got the nerve to give me that argument. He has lost the moral authority to lead anybody.
You want to determine who's going to lead another country.
No.
You don't have that right.
No, but
we're American. We don't have the right to tell them who's going to lead the
Can
Serbs.
I tell you something on international law? You willing to listen? The right to self-determination is inalienable, but national sovereignty is not absolute, and he has lost the right to
What do you want to do about it? Do you want to kill him?
Listen, I don't mind that we should target where he lives because that's where he strategizes. We went after Gaddafi. We went after Saddam Hussein. What are we waiting for?
Waiting for
Joe and
repeal of 12333, which we shouldn't be
that's
doing.
Where you and I agree. We'll pick it up. We'll find out how Congressman Rohrbacher feels about that.
Congressman Rohrbacher, Associated Press has a story tonight, just about an hour or so old, that says that NATO has all but abandoned the idea of ground troops, saying that they feel they can deplete the will of Milosevic simply with an air war. Do you agree with that?
Well, listen, I'm not here to second-guess a military strategy. The fact is this administration seems to be making political decisions again, just like they did in Vietnam. The Democrats did in Vietnam, with getting us into a big mess down there. As far as I'm concerned, now I agree with almost everything that Joe has said tonight about Milosevic, and I certainly think that it's better to assassinate people like Milosevic than it is to murder tens of thousands of his countrymen.
However, I don't see it as an assassination. I see it as a hit in the middle of war.
Congressman, you know Executive Order 12333, initiated by Gerald Ford, in effect ever since, and reaffirmed by every president since, we should not be in the assassination business. Wouldn't it make our own leaders more vulnerable?
No, well, I would have to say this, that for us to murder like we did, and I pardon the expression, kill perhaps 50 to 90,000 Iraqis who loved us, and in order not to kill Saddam Hussein, who was a monster, it makes no sense to me.
So you want to target leaders of foreign countries and assassinate them? Is that what you want to do?
I want to target dictators and people who've committed mass genocide and Hitlers of our generation, rather than having millions of other people die.
And every time we've tried that has failed. We went after Gaddafi, that failed. We never got Saddam Hussein. When has this ever been a successful policy for the United States?
Well, I think that, let me put it this way, where it can be a successful policy, we should not rule it out as an option. And in the future, of course, we should another lesson we should learn is that the Europeans should defend themselves. We right now have expended so much money. Europe is more wealthy than we are, and here we are expending tens of billions of dollars. Let the Europeans
Congressman
Rohrbacher,
but they don't seem to be able to assume that responsibility.
Thank you, you're right. All right, Joe, I want to go to you for just a second here. And this is a problem that bothers me. Newsweek, this current edition, is reporting that, and this had been reported earlier, but it just brings it home that Defense Secretary Cohn was told by the Pentagon that he couldn't reach his goal using just air power. And this is the strategy they adopted in spite of what our own military experts advise. Exactly. This is infuriating to me.
It's a problem. I can't believe that we're not listening to the experts. Right from the beginning, we were told that an air war would not work. And if our goal was to save the Albanians inside, Obviously, we're not accomplishing that
It's not going to be.
goal.
All right, now next question.
So why are we implementing policies that accomplish the goals of NATO and the United States? Is there another deal here? I keep saying this. I don't know.
You think there might be?
Are we this dumb? I hope not.
Well,
but I can tell you, the only solution for Kosovo, I got to raise it right here, is independence. Here's our bumper sticker.
I like it.
Tens of thousands going out. Independence for Kosovo.
All right, let me
the
ask
only
you
way to
this.
peace in the Balkans.
And you can buy them for $9.99.
No, I give them away. Gotta give them away.
I'm kidding. All right, but let me ask you this. The Yugoslav commander said to NATO, you want ground troops, that there will be hell on earth if troops are sent in. Hell on earth. And they're dug in, the Yugoslav commander.
But you're listening to
40,000 dug in. That's where you and I part company.
You know how
at that
many
point.
accidents we're going to have if we keep dragging this thing out?
All right,
Go ahead,
Congressman
Dana.
Rohrbach, we only got 10
Sean,
seconds.
I would just say this, that the Kosovars have always been willing to fight their own battles.
Exactly.
Our biggest mistake so far is we haven't armed and trained the Kosovars to fight their own battles.
I agree with you. I agree.
Stay with us on Hannity and Combs. Here in New York by Joe DioGuardi, a former New York congressman and current president of the Albanian American Civic League. Thanks very much for being here.
My pleasure.
As an Albanian American, you should be jumping for joy at this peace agreement. You're not. Why?
Well, I'm not, because I've watched Mr. Milosevic now since 1987. I brought this issue to Congress in 1986, and since he's occupied Kosovo, that was 1989, and then went into Slovenia, 91, Croatia, 92, Bosnia, 93, we have not seen him keep one promise, not one. Now I have to congratulate President Clinton. I'm a Republican because he has learned after 10 years how to deal with Mr. Milosevic. He is sending the right signals that we will not stop the bombing until we see the withdrawal of all the Serbian troops. What's the bottom line here? The bottom line is not to repeat the mistakes of Bosnia. Do you know that there are 800,000 people that have still not returned to Bosnia? We don't want to see that here. We'll have troops here forever. We need to resolve this. And the only way to resolve this, I believe, is to create a structure, hopefully some kind of strategic trust or protectorate for a limited period of time that will enable the Albanians, once they're back, and they won't come back until the Serbian troops are out, once they're back, to have their right of self-determination, and that will probably be, well, in my mind, no doubt, it will be independence.
What about arming the KLA? Would you advocate that?
I believe we've done that already. I don't think we've told anybody about it. I think that the results that you see recently, the favorable results, where the NATO bombers were striking while the KLA was getting to the tanks and getting them out in the open, is a result of some kind of cooperation agreement. And if you recall, in Bosnia, we did arm the Croatian army, and that's what brought Milosevic to the table. The arming of the ground troops on the ground and the bombing. So I believe that already we've done something here. But there's no doubt that if you want to end this and end it in an efficient way, and you don't put ground troops in there, certainly in this non-permissive environment, you must arm the KLA, and there's nothing wrong with that.
There's a bit of a catch-22 here for allies, it seems to me, for the NATO allies, in that if they have told Milosevic that in order for there to be a pause in the bombing, he's got to get his forces together and get them out of there. Now, as soon as he pools his forces together, they become sitting ducks for more targets. So on the one hand, either NATO can say, you know, you can mass your troops, we're not going to hit them, or else he knows that he's not in danger of doing so. How do you handle that kind of a quandary?
Well, I don't think he's in any position to bargain. I mean, we have a man now after 10 years. We've called him a war criminal, but now he's been indicted. It's no longer rhetoric. He's an indicted war criminal. Why are we dealing with him? We have this man on the ropes. Why are we going to let him off the ropes?
You want to march in and arrest him?
Well, if we don't do it, I'll bet you the Albanians are going to do it. You know, we have to learn from our Jewish brothers and sisters. Didn't they go after Adolf Eichmann? I mean, he was indicted. Nobody would get him, and finally somebody had the courage to take him. Now, either NATO's going to do it, or at some point the Albanian people are going to have to take matters in their own hands and bring him to The Hague. Why don't we go all the way while he's on the ropes and remove him from this process? Because there can't be any peace in Europe, certainly not the Balkans, with Slobodan Milosevic sitting at the table.
But you know you're going to get all kinds of complaints from people who say, you know, the United Nations didn't authorize that this is illegal under international law.
Well,
if you've got the independent war tribunal or the war crimes tribunal saying, after much research, that this man is a war criminal by its indictment, what more do you need under international law? Why should we be dealing with anyone running a state? And by the way, let's not talk about sovereignty here. Here's a man that's a Stalinist communist who's deprived his people of information. Even the newscasters, when they go on, say that they cannot freely go around Belgrade or into Kosova. So we know that the people of Belgrade for 10 years have been poisoned, much like the Germans were poisoned by the Nazi regime. So under those circumstances, why do we think that this man deserves to be a sovereign leader, not only of the Albanian people, but of the Serbian people? I think it's time we did the good Serbian people a big favor and removed Slobodan Milosevic. We have every right to do it. This is war. He's on the ropes. Let's go in there. We let Saddam Hussein off the hook. Let's not let Milosevic off the hook.
Joe DioGuardi, thank you. Was the NATO effort worth it? We're joined by former New York Congressman Joseph DioGuardi, the president of the Albanian American Civic League, and in Washington is Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis, the senior director for foreign policy and national security at the Family Research Council. Good to have you both back on Hannity and Combs. Colonel McGinnis, you're saying now in a position paper that I read, you say, by negotiating with Milosevic, NATO has made him the guarantor of peace, much like he became in Bosnia, and that this communicates that NATO does not treat the International Tribunal's indictment seriously. Should we not have negotiated with him to try to get this peace?
Well, this is deja vu, as you know, Alan. You know, we did the same thing with the Dayton Accords in '95, and we'll probably end up doing this in northern Yugoslavia with Vojvodina, with the Hungarian ethnic groups before long, and the Montenegro people in the south. You know, this guy's got to be stopped. He has an agenda, and that agenda is out of control.
But is this peace not worth going for? Should we not have negotiated? You have to talk to the guy in order to come to some kind of agreement.
You, in fact, do have to talk to someone, and unfortunately, we've allowed him to stay in there. But keep in mind, his success is real. You know, he accomplished his goal. The Albanians have been kicked out of Kosovo. Yeah, they may go back in. That's not certain, given our history in the Balkans. But in fact, the losers here are the United States people and the Yugoslavian and the Kosovar people, and not the politicians.
Congressman, why do you say it is certain?
Absolutely. What's this all about? It's to get the Albanians back to where they belong.
What makes you think they're all going to want to go back, be able to go back, and at what cost to the United States?
Well, that's the whole deal here. If you don't do the right thing, they won't go back. And if they don't go back, you're going to have a disaster.
What's it going to cost us? How many years?
Well,
how many generations?
Let's start with the beginning. No one trusts Slobodan Milosevic, correct? I think we all agree on that. And it's ludicrous to me that when he's on the ropes, when Clinton's strategy finally worked, no ground troops, he pounded Milosevic. Milosevic doesn't give ice away in the winter, and he's saying, let's have peace. Why? The man has been decimated.
We pledged 70,000 U.S. ground troops
that's what we pledged.
As a peacekeeping force.
That's what we pledged, but right now the Serb soldiers are deserting. The KLA has become effective. He's losing. He knows it, so he's crying uncle. So what do? We say, let's have peace.
Hasn't he already won, Colonel McGinnis?
Yeah, well, quite frankly, Alan, we have, you know, recent history shows us that the refugees have not returned to the rightful place in Bosnia, whether they be Serbs, Muslims, or Croats. And the KLA, you know, if we're going to disarm them, I don't really believe that. And yes, there will be Serbs left behind that will be antagonistic to the Albanians. The Albanians know that this is not going to be a safe environment. And quite frankly, we haven't resolved the issue with the Russians. The Russians are going to want to play a role here, and they're going to want to have probably the northern areas, and the Serbs left behind will not allow the Albanians back in.
Bosnians that have not yet returned?
Congressman DioGuardi, we have to go further and deeper into this whole area. First of all, Milosevic wins in this deal. He stays in power.
Absolutely
he keeps
not.
his. Wait a minute.
Why do you think
Have you read this deal?
Why do you think
read this deal? He stays in power. He has his military. There's no penalty for his war crimes at all. The KLA, the people that agreed to autonomy, not independence, what they wanted, these are the people that really get screwed. These are the people that get disarmed in the process.
What makes you think this deal is going forward?
That's what the deal is.
Did you hear President Clinton what he said?
Are you kidding?
He said that we'll do nothing until all the Serb troops are out. And he's going to look at his actions, not his words.
can't believe
At
you're
least
sitting here saying
Clinton.
this. This is a disaster. Let me tell you, this deal is done. You want to know why it's done?
It's not
done.
Monica
Lewinsky couldn't do it. For 4 years, this guy's had his poll numbers up in the 60s. This 74-day war has brought his poll numbers to the 50s. He's scared to death. He's getting out for political reasons and to save Al Gore. And if you don't think that's a deal, you're wrong.
No legacy whatsoever.
He has no legacy.
Well, at
Monica
least he's gonna
Lewinsky,
have
he has a legacy.
He's going to have this one, that he took down the second Nazi leader that we had in this century, Slobodan Milosevic.
But wait a minute, but I don't understand. You don't see this, Congressman. You're shocking me here tonight. You don't see. This is a done deal. I guarantee you, the president's made the deal.
You are naive.
I would say the same to you.
You think the Albanians will go back? The whole deal is to get the Albanians back.
Yes.
They will not go back if there's one Serb soldier left there.
But it doesn't matter. He's going to be in power. He's going to have his military.
Listen,
and Clinton wanted a deal because this is all politics.
Can I say, after what the Albanians have been through since Tito died, don't forget, this didn't start 2 years ago. It started in 1980, and then it was escalated in 1989 with the occupation. Do you think that the Albanians will stand by while Milosevic comes back to the table?
I am telling you that Clinton has sold you out. Clinton has never been in this for principle. Clinton is in this. He's scared to death of his poll.
If they don't take Milosevic down, the Albanian people have learned from the Jewish people. They're going to go after him like they went after Adolf Eichmann. He's now been indicted.
And not only did Clinton win, in the process, we killed 2,000 innocent civilians. Killed them. Slaughtered them needlessly, and he's bailing out of this thing right now for nothing.
You forgot about the
single greatest military debacle we've seen in this century.
Forgot about the Albanians.
The carnage here is devastating. Under a just war theory, this is not a just war. Nobody wins here. Unfortunately, you know, we have a lot of civilians that have been killed, hospitals bombed, marketplaces bombed. The UN just came back from Kosovo surveying there. They found that 80% of the houses are destroyed, that most of the infrastructure is destroyed. We don't have a country to send these Albanians back to. We're going to have to start from scratch, and we don't have a lot of time.
We're going to take a break right there.
Right now we continue with former New York Congressman Joe DioGuardi, and he's the president of the Albanian American Civic League. Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis, Senior Director for Foreign Policy and National Security at the Family Research Council. We're sitting here in the break. You say Slobo cried uncle, and I say Slobo won, and I'll tell you why I think he won. First of all, you notice there was no mention of his war crime prosecutions in the 12-point peace plan, none at all. And he gets to keep his military.
It's wrong.
Gets to keep his military.
Do you think that this is all a closed deal?
He got the ethnic Albanians. Let me finish.
It's not a done deal.
He got the ethnic Albanians out. He got the bombing to stop, and he got his opposition disarmed. How could you not declare that anything but a full victory for Slobo?
Do you see what he did to Yugoslavia? Look at the infrastructure. No bridges, no trains, no electricity.
The people
food is disappearing.
The people he wanted out are
jump
gone.
on him like the Ceausescus would jump on by the
punishment for him?
Yeah, but his people are not overthrowing him.
If NATO doesn't take him down, the Albanians will get him like the Jews got Eichmann.
You're dreaming.
They will.
He still has his military, Congressman.
What military? They're deserting like rats right now in Kosova.
No, they aren't.
They are.
No, they aren't.
My reports that I'm reading, when you go back, he has more troops dug in than he did at the beginning of this conflict.
Quite frankly,
72 days ago.
KLA has flushed them out, and now they're being hit by the air.
Well, the KLA is going to be disarmed, Colonel McGinnis, and that's part of the deal. The KLA
that's part of the deal. I don't expect that to happen,
thinking.
Sean. Keep in mind what's going on in the camps in northern Albania and Macedonia. They've been cauldrons of hatred toward the Serbs, and you think that we're going to put Serbs and Albanians in the same towns or in the same area?
Do you agree with my assessment here? I say Slobo won, and he won big time in this whole thing.
Not.
And this was the biggest waste of U.S. military might in our history. And we killed 2,000 innocent people.
The statute never runs on that indictment. The statute will never run.
Well,
he's a target now for the rest of his life.
The indictment, there are a lot of indictments from this particular tribunal, and these people are walking free in Bosnia today, and we could have arrested them a long time ago. Milosevic is going to die of old age before he gets indicted.
Well, if he doesn't leave Yugoslavia, someone's going to come in to grab him.
Don't count on Congressman, he can say he stood up to the great Satan. He stood up to the United States.
That's right.
He solidifies his power base. He's now a hero to some of his people.
When the Serbian people get access to the truth, which they don't have, and you know it, because the media is totally controlled by him, and when they wake up and they see what he did to their country, you watch how fast he goes.
He didn't do it. NATO brought the 10,000 bombs on their head that killed their kids and their families.
He started this. He started this.
But who do you think they're going to blame? They're going to blame the West, the great Satan.
Let them get information. Let them get access to the truth.
And when do you think that's going to happen?
I hope it happens soon.
But let's be realistic. realistic.
Well, I hope it happens soon.
I hope it happens soon, too, but let's be realistic. Is it going to happen soon?
You can't fool all the people all the time, and even the Serbian people can't be fooled
You're
all the time.
presuming that Serbia is going to all of a sudden become a democracy with a free press and people have access to information.
By the way, if it doesn't, we got a big problem.
Hey, listen,
because
if
we don't
the troops out of
democratize Serbia,
today,
forget about
you would
stability
have
in
the
Europe.
same mess that you have in Kosovo.
Go ahead, say it again, Colonel McGinnis.
If you pull the troops out of Bosnia today, the Serbs, the Muslims would go at it once again. The war, it didn't stop. It basically stopped it. There was an armistice of sorts. If we go in there and separate the people, yeah, we can stop the killing. But as soon as we leave, they're going to start killing one another.
But there's another problem with Bosnia. 800,000 refugees have yet to return because they didn't like the Russian presence there and they didn't trust that deal at Dayton.
Congressman, how long?
Don't do it again.
How long should the United States be involved in Kosovo? How many years? How many dollars? How many tax dollars should we be spending?
Let me put the question to you. Why did we go in there to begin with?
That's a good question.
This is an area of vital interest.
This
case has not been made. It's in the middle of Europe.
What vital security interest is brought to bear in the Balkans?
You've got Macedonia there.
One.
You've got Greece and Turkey. Yes, Greece and Turkey with their interest in Macedonia.
At the U.S.
Listen, we didn't go in there just because we liked the Albanian people or we hated the Serbs. We went in there because there was a reason.
Humanitarian reasons, which has nothing to do with national security.
But you're answering my question with a question. You're not answering me. How long should we be in there for? How many years do you want to stay?
As long as it takes to bring peace and stability to the Balkans.
2 generations.
Because if you don't do it, you'll have many more soldiers there in the future, and it'll cost us a fortune.
It's 50 years,
and that's why I wouldn't buy this deal.
At least 50 years.
We're going to end it
Colonel,
right there.
I wouldn't buy this deal.
Congressman DioGuardi, good to see you. Bob McGinnis, it's always a pleasure, Colonel. Thank you for being with us.
Joining me right now, as he has so often since this conflict began, former New York Congressman and now president of the Albanian American Civic League, Joseph DioGuardi. Thanks for coming in. You were shaking your head at that piece of information.
It's absolutely ridiculous. You know, I was listening to the ambassador, and, you know, he may be a good man, but like most good communists, they are brainwashed. And for him to say that Milosevic is democratically elected when under his system, the information is totally controlled. Remember what Thomas Jefferson said many years ago, information is the currency of democracy. When people don't get information or they get the wrong information, almost anybody can be elected. And here the good Serbian people have been poisoned by a system that controls the media, just the way Hitler controlled the media in Nazi Germany, and you have now a war criminal running the country, and the ambassador is trying to sell us on the basis that he's democratically elected. That's nonsense.
And what do you make of this? No journalists allowed in with NATO troops, and they have to get their visas from Belgrade.
It's totally ridiculous. And what it tells me is that it's worse than we can imagine. It's probably going to be a repeat, although nothing will ever match the Holocaust and the concentration camps. You remember the shock that we saw when we walked in? I think that they're trying to prepare us for the shock that we're going to see when we see hundreds and hundreds of villages torched. There are now reports coming out that they've created crematoria in the Trepčka mines. The bodies are being burned. I mean, they're trying to clean up their act so they can go back to the table and try to make some kind of a deal here. There is no deal. Mr. Milosevic has lost. And I believe, and all Albanians believe, that it should be an unconditional surrender. We shouldn't be dealing with a war criminal. He should be now accepting our terms, and I hope that the bombing intensifies until these generals realize that they have lost and that they have to pay the price for the brutality that we've witnessed, not only in the last 2 years. Don't forget, this aggression started in 1989 when Milosevic walked into Kosova with tanks and took away their autonomy.
Back to the journalists for a moment. You think the horrors are going to be so bad it would turn world opinion against the Serbs like nothing else in this campaign?
Kathy, world opinion has already turned against the Serbs, but what we're going to see is something that we're not prepared to see.
We've heard stories, but what we always have to say is these cannot be independently confirmed. We must say that as journalists. But if we go in as journalists, we will know what we can report.
And you've been prevented from going into Kosova. You've been prevented from walking around Belgrade even. That has been said by all the news media. We have to now prepare ourselves mentally and emotionally for something that we have not yet thought we didn't think we'd see since World War II, because you're going to see wanton destruction. You're going to see not only houses burned, but we're going to see indications of mass graves. We already know they're there. We've seen them from the air. That's why the court acted.
And
it wasn't easy for the court to act under these circumstances.
And perhaps we will see them as witnesses to also the refugees returning to their homes, which has been destroyed. And we will also probably have pictures of them returning to their homes and their towns for the first time, which are probably
let's hope,
devastating.
But don't forget, that's what this is all about, to get the refugees back. Okay. They're not going to return until they know that NATO's in control and that all the Serbs are out. They need that kind of security.
Thank you so much for coming in again. We really appreciate your contributions.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, joining us to discuss the situation, a peaceful solution to the conflict in Kosovo may seem like a long shot now after NATO talks with Yugoslav military officials broke down on yesterday. I'm sure you heard about that. What will it take to get the momentum going again, especially now that Slobodan Milosevic is talking peace once again? Joining us to discuss all of this is Joe DioGuardi, who is the former New York Congressman and the current president of the Albanian American Civic League, and Radmila Milantijevic. She is the former Serbian minister in information and a professor at City University of New York. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you coming in.
Morning.
You know, so much has changed over the weekend. I mean, while we're sitting out at the beach, the war stopped and started again, and now he's saying he's willing to come back to the table. What's this all about?
What this is all about, the war didn't stop. NATO continued to bomb and continues to bomb today. What has happened here is the document of two pages of the document which President Arisari and Chernomidin took to President Milosevic stipulates, and you read it clearly, everything that is to be done regarding Kosovo is under the auspices of the United Nations. The United Nations Security Council has to vote the resolution. And until that resolution is voted, the specifics of the withdrawal of the Serbian troops and the ultimate resolution of the problem cannot be achieved.
Well, it seems the sticking point here is that Milosevic wants to leave some of his troops in there and doesn't want to guarantee safe return of those refugees. And you know what? NATO's been at this for those two goals the whole time, and if he won't do that, well, we're going to keep on bombing.
Right. You hear the NATO spokesman this morning and last night. They're talking of NATO and NATO alone. No, it's the Security Council of the United Nations.
You know what? I don't understand that, and here's why, Joe. The whole time, this hasn't been a UN thing. We've avoided the UN carefully because of fears of vetoes and other reasons that we all understand. This is about NATO.
Haven't we been here before? Haven't we seen Milosevic break every promise that he's made? And that's why you must keep up the bombing. In fact, I think you have to intensify the bombing. There was a poll done overnight that says that 70% of the people, more than 70%, do not trust Slobodan Milosevic, and 63% say keep the bombing until we have this deal solidified. Milosevic has lost. That's why he's crying uncle. When someone loses, and NATO has won, we must impose our terms.
I have to ask you, though, has he really lost? I mean, haven't a lot of his objectives absolutely been met? I mean, how many Kosovar Albanians are left in that country? And for the ones who aren't there, what do they have to go back to? Not a whole heck of a lot.
Shepard, he's now an indicted war criminal. All the infrastructure in Serbia, bridges, electricity, trains, the military infrastructure, gone. He's got the worst reputation now in the world as a war criminal. The Serbian people have been brought down to their knees economically. Yes, the Albanians are out, but they must return because we cannot allow this to stand in this century. Ethnic cleansing.
I understand, and I am very much in agreement that the Albanian refugees should return back to Kosovo.
But they need security. They need security to return. That's why NATO has to be in charge.
Yugoslavia is an independent state. Yugoslavia is a sovereign state. NATO is a military alliance. Yugoslavia does not want NATO on its territory as NATO. It would come in as an occupying force. Yugoslavia has to fight to prevent occupation. So what Yugoslavia is looking for is the proper organization, that is the United Nations, which has the authority in such matters. What's the fear in going to the Security Council resolution where the relationship of the forces are even more equal?
There's more to it than that.
There's China there, there's Russia there, as well as the United States.
We got a little breaking news that I want to pass along, but it's also important to remember, if I'm Slobodan Milosevic, and from what we know about him, his primary goal is to stay in power. And it sounds like, at least for now, he's done that. I want to read you what's just crossing here. This from Moscow. Foreign ministers from the 7 leading industrial nations and Russia meeting in Bonn today agreed on a draft UN Security Council resolution on the crisis in Kosovo. This, according to Russia's RIA news agency, quoting unidentified diplomatic sources in Bonn, saying that the draft could be sent to the Security Council here in New York as soon as tonight. Now, that should move things along pretty quickly.
That doesn't mean that NATO is not going to be in charge. What they're saying is NATO will be the core group for security underneath a resolution. That doesn't mean NATO is, the UN is going to take over. God forbid. You know, look at Bosnia. 800,000 refugees have yet to return to Bosnia. Do we want that here? Do you think any Albanians will return if there's not complete security? I mean, this is the whole objective.
You know, Mr. DioGuardi talks...
You know what? We're going to talk about this in a little bit, but we got to hit a commercial break. Thanks to both of you. Appreciate it. The conflict in Kosovo is the story that's tops on Fox this morning. We'll cross over to Belgium and find out what NATO has to say about the peace breakdown.
Welcome back, everyone. For more on the uneasy peace in Kosovo and what needs to be done to keep it, we are joined by Radmila Melentijevic. She's the former Minister of Information for the Republic of Serbia, and Joseph DioGuardi, President of the Albanian American Civic League. Thanks to both of you for joining us. What an interesting day. What interesting developments. The Russians surprised everybody by going into Pristina ahead of NATO. And now the question is, what does it mean? Is that a significant move? I want to throw the question here to you, Joseph.
It's very sad and disappointing that this could happen, especially on the day that President Clinton told the Serbian people, if you want our help, you have to get rid of Slobodan Milosevic. And here, the propaganda move by the Russians so far will have lengthened his political life in Belgrade, because that's all they're going to play on the TV. You know, the problem we got now is that you've got Russian diplomats saying one thing and Russian military people doing another.
Sure,
who can you trust?
We're getting all that conflicting information.
Remember Pearl Harbor? All the assurances we got before Pearl Harbor that everything is okay, nothing would happen. Now look what we have here. Now this is very disconcerting.
Do you think this is as significant as Joseph is saying? Because certainly the Pentagon and NATO are playing it down.
I do not think this is that significant for the simple reason the Security Council resolution talks about the United Nations peacekeeping force. It did not give Kosovo to NATO. It gave Kosovo to a supervision of under the United Nations, and the Russians are not barred from going in. Now, probably the significance of it is more symbolic than anything else. We have had the reports that the Serbs, now frightened, may leave Kosovo. Many of them may leave Kosovo. And the idea is not now to ethnically cleanse the Serbs from Kosovo, but to keep all the population who live in Kosovo to stay there and the refugees to return.
Well, to be sure, though, we can't say that the Serbs are being ethnically cleansed from Kosovo as the Albanians were ethnically cleansed from Kosovo.
No.
Certainly, it's not the same thing. If they choose to leave because they're afraid, that's very different from being ethnically cleansed by
but they will. If they leave, to the extent that they leave, they will leave out of fear. Fear that they may be killed,
but
that
Kathy,
they may be obstructed.
I see it differently. I mean, I testified in front of the U.S. Senate May of 1998 and said that Russia should not have been part of the contact group. The Russians are blood brothers and sisters to the Serbs. That's where the Serbs came from in the 7th century A.D. And obviously they have taken the part of the Serbs and everything. Look what has happened in Bosnia. 800,000 refugees have not yet returned.
To take the flip side of that, though, what's the matter with that? They're blood brothers to the Serbs. They want to come in to reassure the Serbs that they don't have to leave out of fear.
Because there's something here that's transparent to me, at least. They're looking to carve out a zone in the north, right where the Trepčka mines are, some of the most prodigious mines in Europe for gold, chrome, coal. Hitler used these mines to build his war machine. World War II, Yugoslavia has used them for 50 years to collateralize its debts. What this is all about is to get on the ground, position themselves, and force NATO to do something they didn't want to do, and that's to give the Russians their own zone. And already they're mentioning the north. You know, we see this in nature. A lion or a cheetah takes down a big prey, and then who comes around? The street fighters, the jackals and the hyenas, and they relentlessly, persistently keep it up until maybe they will walk away from the prey. This is exactly what's happening.
Red Miller, you're shaking your head.
Absolutely not. I think the United States policy here is to work with the Russians together under the auspices of the United Nations to bring peace to Kosovo and to ensure a future for all its residents.
So you doubt what Joseph is saying. They're not trying to create a zone. They're not trying to gain control of valuable resources.
I couldn't tell you what the Russians have in the back of their minds, but if the mines of Trepča, which is obviously very rich, goes to anyone, it's going to go to private capital that is going to come from the West. Without the investment of that capital coming from the West, the Trepča mine cannot compete on the world market. So it needs the infusion of huge sums of capital. This is not going to come from Russia.
But look what has happened already.
Maybe from Germany, from the United States.
Kathy, now it's interesting, we hear this, but guess who put in between $1 billion and $2 billion in 1998 into the Trepča mines?
Who?
A Greek holding company, Mytilineos.
So they're part of NATO.
Well, wait a minute. They're part of NATO, yes, but this also gave Greece, one of our NATO allies, a conflict. And I'd like to know, why did they do that at that time? Milosevic needed the money for the war.
So you think the Russians have ulterior motives? And what you're saying, basically, Joseph, is that you doubt everything that's coming out of NATO now. Everything that just came out of that Pentagon briefing about how it's just part of the process. It was a mistake. It was a misunderstanding. We'll all work together. You think that's either naive or just baldly false?
What the Russians and the Serbs understand very well, and our diplomats have to learn, is that possession is 9/10 of the law. While we were talking at Rambouillet, Milosevic was marching 40,000 troops and tanks into Kosova. Here we're talking, President is claiming victory, and the Russians, for a whole day, nonstop, just keep going from Bosnia to Yugoslavia to Kosova. That's not by accident. Yeltsin said he had deployed the troops.
So far, what is the damage of that, though, Joseph? What damage has been done?
All right, number one, the big damage is that the goal is to return all the Albanians. They will not come back if they sense that security is not there, and they only trust NATO at this point. They will not trust the Russians. And this is now an intimidation factor to keep them out.
Okay, interesting point. Thanks, both of you, for joining us today.
The Serb forces are in the process of withdrawal, and a massive NATO-led peacekeeping force is slowly moving into Kosovo. Of course, they have to deal with the Russians, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Will the peace agreement hold over the long term? Joining me now to discuss this is Joe DioGuardi. He is president of the Albanian American Civic League, and Radmila Milentijevic. She is former Minister of Information for Greater Serbia and Yugoslavia, and she is now a professor emeritus at City College. Thanks both to you. Good to see you again. Radmila, let me go first to you. We are hearing reports now of mass graves in Kosovo. How do we go about and verify these reports?
Well, I think that the most important thing is to bring peace to Kosovo. Right now, the forces are getting in, the United Nations forces, bring conditions under which people can return back to their homes and begin building the local self-government.
But the future of Serbia's control of Kosovo depends on whether these reports become
absolutely
verified.
Then what you have to do is get the experts from The Hague, the forensic experts, to come there and verify this information which you have now. Right now it's a hearsay. People see, people tell, refugees see, the other refugees tell, but the experts have to verify it, and whoever is responsible for atrocities of this nature should be standing before
now, Joe, there are dozens of sites.
For the past 20 years, though, the issue of human rights has been used for propaganda purposes for both sides. I saw it done 10 years that I covered the wars in Central America, 10, 12 years. Is there any way to verify that these reports are true and to hold back our judgment until we find out if these reports are true? Because you've been jumping right in with your judgments.
Right. Let's get the experts on the ground. Let's give them open access to the sites. We know from last summer when the Serbs torched 500 villages, when they got the green light to go in and wipe out the Kosovo Liberation Army, what they did is they tried to wipe out the Albanian population. We know that there are dozens of grave sites. Let the experts go in. They have not been able to go in. There have been no journalists in Kosovo. There have been no experts in Kosovo. Let's get the facts. But if you want to see why this happened, go back to our own U.S. State Department country reports from 1985. I testified in Congress as a congressman, and afterwards,
and used those examples. We never acted on it, but some of the most brutal violations of human rights were against the Albanian people by the Serbs, and they're recorded by our State Department.
Miller?
Before the bombing started on March 24 of this year, we have had a civil war in Kosovo going on for more than a year. And we were talking, the figures that we were talking about, you were talking about, State Department was talking about, is between 2,000 and 3,000 dead people in Kosovo in a civil war. And not all of them were Albanians. There were lots of Serbian civilians who were dead, some Serbian police who were dead.
Killed by the NATO bombing?
No, that's before the NATO bombing.
Before the NATO bombing.
And then until
so killed
then,
by the KLA, you're suggesting?
Right, or the Serbian police, so depending.
But those numbers can't be
But
trusted.
until March 24th, we had the international presence there. We had 1,400 international observers there. Then they were withdrawn, the bombing started, and from the time the bombing started until now, we really don't know what has been happening.
Well, but the bottom line is we will know. Do either of you have any doubt that these forces going in there will find out the truth?
Absolutely.
That's what this is all about, to make Kosovo secure so that not only the Albanians can return, because that's the objective of this whole NATO exercise, to get all the Serbian police, special forces, and army out, get the Albanians back, but allow now the journalists free access and the experts.
Now, Red Miller, if it turns out that there was a systematic attempt to kill off the ethnic Albanians or drive them out by the Serb government, should the Serb government lose control of Kosovo?
No, Kosovo does not belong to Serb government. Kosovo belongs to the people who live there and who are part of Serbia. They are Albanians, they are Serbs, they're Gypsies, there are other nationalities.
Should they be allowed to vote on whether they should declare independence from Serbia?
I think we have crossed that bridge. The United Nations resolution reestablishes the authority of Yugoslavia over Kosovo, the authority of Serbia over Kosovo, with a large, substantial degree, as the resolution says, of local autonomy.
Joe, why have we
that's not the reality. The reality is that the Albanian people will not live any longer under a Serbian regime that wants to exterminate it. I've been on your programs before, and I've showed you the memo, expulsion of the Albanians. This has been in writing since 1937, and this now is the culmination of that. There is no reason for the Albanians to believe they have any future with the Serbs.
I have in my hands a copy of that memo from 1937, and Ludmilla, it does suggest that at least back that far, since 1937, there's a statement in this: the only way and the only means to cope with the ethnic Albanians is the brute force of an organized state in which we have always been superior to them.
And that's
what memo are you talking about? The memo you got from Mr. DioGuardi?
No.
From 1937 by Mr. Kubrilovic.
He's a dead man now. You can ascribe anything to him.
But he was honored 2 years before he died by Milosevic in 1990, believe it or not.
But this is a typewritten thing which you got from Mr. DioGuardi.
No,
the
I didn't get it
Albanians
from him. I got it from somebody else, but it was from the ethnic
It was given to me in 1986, and I gave it to our State Department as far back as that. So this is not something that was put together.
In 1941, when Hitler conquered Yugoslavia, he carved Kosovo out of Yugoslavia and gave it to Albania, which was a fascist state, and they proceeded to clear out of Kosovo then 150,000 Serbs and Montenegrins.
Albanians did not do that.
Who never were able to return back, who were never allowed to return back. So it is really during Hitler's rule in Kosovo, or the Albanian fascist rule, that the balance of ethnic relationship was changed.
We have to leave it at that, Joe. And Red Miller, we thank you very much for coming. Bottom line, though, you both agree that now we will find out the truth.
Absolutely. The truth has to come out.
Let the people see it for themselves.
Absolutely.
Red Miller and Joe, we thank you very much.
In focus tonight, the revolution in Yugoslavia. Joining me now with their opinions on the uprising and the push for democracy is Danielle Schremak, director of the Institute for Balkan Affairs and the author of the book War of Words, Washington Tackles the Yugoslav Conflict. And here in the studio with me, former New York Congressman Joe DioGuardi, who is the chairman of the Albanian American Civic League. Good to see the two of you.
Nice to be here.
Danielle, it has been reported that Mr. Milosevic has congratulated the president-elect. Does that mean anything? Is he conceding defeat as far as you're concerned?
It seems that way. I think it's good news. Certainly, it was always my hope that there would be a peaceful transition of power, so I think that is good news. Now the question remains whether Koštunica can become the leader that I think everybody hopes he will be and get that country back to normal.
Do you have faith, Joe, that he will be that kind of leader?
We don't know. We really don't know who Mr. Koštunica is yet. We do know that he is a Serbian nationalist, and I think it's good for the Serbian people to have someone now that they can trust. But don't forget, there are a lot of dimensions to this problem that are not resolved yet. Montenegro, who wants independence.
Sure.
Kosovo, who is still in the process of being rebuilt under an enigmatic Resolution 1244, which effectively dismantles Serbian control but allows Albanians now to elect their own local leaders. So what is Mr. Kostunica going to do about this? And by the way, what about the Albanian prisoners that were taken illegally by Mr. Milosevic's troops as they were retreating from the Kosovo jails into Serbia, more than 2,000 still languishing? I think the first thing that we have to see as a sign of his a positive attitude towards Western principles is a complete release immediately of these political prisoners. And what about war criminals? Mr. Milosevic is a war criminal, and so is Mr. Karadzic. These are his friends.
All right, Daniel, jump in there. In your judgment, what is more important, restoring democracy here or trying Mr. Milosevic as a war criminal?
Both.
Well, I think it's important for Washington to stay out of the internal affairs of Yugoslavia, and I think that the people there need to decide what's going on. But Kosovo is a very important question, and I would stay away from name-calling such as nationalist. I mean, I think Kostunica is a patriot, just like hopefully many people here in Washington are, who are protecting the interests of this country. So I think Kostunica does want to protect the borders of Yugoslavia, and Kosovo is in the borders of Yugoslavia. And, you know, maybe Washington right now is very excited about Kostunica, but on the other hand, I hope they understand that he will protect the interests of Serbs in Kosovo. You know, on a daily basis, Serbs are being killed there under the watch of KFOR. So the KLA guerrillas are pretty much running things in Kosovo. So those issues have not been resolved. But Kostunica is, I believe, a diplomatic person, and I think he wants to include all ethnic groups in the government of Yugoslavia, and certainly has a chance of, as I said, getting that country back to
Joe,
normal.
you get the final thought tonight, and I know you're not particularly crazy about what Danielle has to say. Do you think she's an apologist for Mr. Milosevic?
Absolutely. She's been that way ever since during the war, because basically she was a paid agent from Mr. Karadzic, and they are
well, that's
good
incorrect.
friends.
It's
in any case,
actually,
you know,
Mr. DioGuardi.
we have it on paper.
We're talking about Kostunica
But
here.
the point is that Yugoslavia has disintegrated, and we ought to let the process continue. Slovenia has gone, Croatia has gone, Macedonia has gone, Bosnia-Herzegovina has gone.
But do you agree with Danielle that we shouldn't intervene? That's up to these folks to decide their business.
But we are right now, as the United Nations,
Yugoslavia is a country, and whether you like to admit it or not.
Yugoslavia is not recognized by the United Nations right now.
And a nation.
Yeah, but let me say this.
I know you wouldn't like
any state that kills its own people,
any
state that kills its own people cannot be considered a state, and that's what they've been doing. Final thought is that I think democracy is in the air. Let's hope now that the Albanians can get what they deserve, which is self-determination, independence under international law.
And I hope Albanians stop killing Serbs in Kosovo.
They've been not doing that.
We have to unfortunately leave it on that note. Joe and Danielle, thank you for your insights tonight.
U podršci albanskom separatizmu i terorizmu na Kosovu i Metohiji posebno se angažovala albanska emigracija u zemljama Zapadne Europe i SAD. U Americi je 86. godine još osnovano Albansko-američka civilna liga pod predsjedništvom uticajnog kongresmena Josefa DioGuardija, čiji je zadatak bio da aktivno lobira na Capitol Hillu za zahteve i ciljeve kosovskih Albanaca. Aktivnim lobiranjem Liga je otvorila put kosovsko-metohijskim separatistima za zvanične kontakte u Američkom senatu i Kongresu. U svakom slučaju, Albansko-američka civilna liga je u mnogome doprinela sistematskom širenju antisrpskog raspoloženja i satanizaciji srpskog naroda u američkoj javnosti.
Hello, I'm former Congressman Joe DioGuardi, the president of the Albanian American Civic League. You have just heard former Serbian dictator and indicted war criminal Slobodan Milosevic misrepresent our important work in Washington to free Kosovo and all Albanians from the tyranny of his regime. You can help us and all Albanians by becoming a member of the Albanian American Civic League in 2004. This is our 15th year working as an independent lobby in Washington and around the world for all Albanians in the Balkans. Please join us and become a member now by visiting the website of the Albanian American Civic League.